So a couple things with that. I remember someone saying something like a lot of kind of cultures like ours, they tend to help the people in long life history mode and harm people in short life history mode, right? And I think that's an interesting kind of idea. And it also seems like, um, what we would call law, and maybe in other cultures, what you might call other things that maybe are similar to law, like where there's like coercive force put behind stuff. Um, they don't always seem to be like, it doesn't always seem to create like a win-win positive sum situation. I remember one tribe, and like our mutual friend Jerem would remember who these are. But there was some ritual where older men would get, so they train, I think, the younger boys to play a certain kind of flute, and it would prepare them to give, what's a technical term I can get for this? Uh, a type of,
Fellatio?
sorry,
Fellatio?
yeah. So let's use that word. So they would, I think, force the young boys to give that to them, right? And I mean, this is a cultural kind of institution that would advantage older over younger, and also older with a certain kind of sexual preference. Um, so it's not that these type of stuff that arises out of law like are win-win positive sum situations. You can have zero sum situations where some are advantaged and some are not, right? Um, and I think we even see a lot of these like with within our own society. Like certainly, for example, like there's the aspect of deferring violence to a third party, like we have with the court systems, where you can interpret this as preventing this escalating feudal type violence, right? But I mean, it does happen where like people within that system, like whether it be judges or police, take advantage of that power, right? Because they have special powers that other people don't, and ways that they're treated that other people don't, and they abuse that, right? And some of this is uninstitutionalized, and that other people who are like judges and police would say no, that's wrong, and try to punish them. But there's also over in different societies at different points in times, even some in our society, where it's institutionalized that those people have this special rights, and the others who have those special rights will defend it, right? And you have a zero time type situation for that. So my point is that it's not everything that results from this is advantageous to everyone, right? Sometimes it's not always positive sum win-win. Sometimes it's zero sum, right?
Yeah, I mean, like if the the position I was trying to stake out there around making a case that the justice system is eugenic, I think is premised on the idea that it's a zero sum situation. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no assumption there that ever. I mean, the assumption is that the eugenic assumption is that certain people left in society are going to do damage to other people's selfish genes and the aspirations thereby, and therefore those people. Two things. First of all, from the sort of punishment or social order perspective, you want to have them in a place where they can't do that damage. But then, like I said, I think there's this second level, this eugenic level, that not only do we want to keep them away from other people, but we want to keep them in a place where they are not going to profit. Now, they might profit within jail, right? There's economy, in jail, and struggle over resources and stuff, but it's not affecting the larger society. And aside of conjugal visits, which is the one tricky part of my whole hypothesis here, aside of that, they can't reproduce. Right. And that's sort of like, to me, the key idea. If you're going to think of the criminal justice system as operating eugenically, and take note, then, I argue it's arguably a good thing, and it's distinctly coercive, right? So here we're, if this is true, we're saying that there's a form of coercive eugenics that actually society approves of, though, as you might note, they wouldn't want to call it eugenics, but I'm saying effectively that's what it is. And it is a zero-sum game, and it is eugenics, and these are the consequences. So I don't know,
Yes. So okay. So there's one aspect in that, how are these people like reproducing, right? Like, it'd be nice if we had some data to like see this one way or the other, but we'll just like, think about this for a bit. What happens if the kind of behavior an individual does that leads them to, get put in prison, right? What happens if before they go into prison, it makes it more likely that they'll have a bunch of children, right? Let's say like each of these people might father like say 5 children, and then they go to jail, right? Now you might say, okay, well, going to jail like is eugenic towards others. Like obviously the people going to jail don't see as eugenic; they probably see as being dysgenic, right? Because it's against their genetic interests, right? So whether it's eugenic or dysgenic is subjective, but what happens if those people end up having more children before that happens? Like that same behavior that gets them in jail also causes them to have more children. Another aspect is, are these life sentences, right? Like if they're not life sentences and they're out later on, then they have other opportunities to have children, right? Now it can be that some of these individuals, they've been in jail for so long and they don't have really any way to do the things that would attract a mate, for example. Like maybe if you've been in there for 20 years, you don't know how to have a job. It might mean that you go back to like theft or armed robbery or something like that, and it ends up you wind up back in jail, right? You might not have the opportunity to reproduce again, but I suspect that's not the case for all individuals. I've talked to some people that work as police, and what I understand for some of these individuals, like some of them who, like for us, we might call it like gang type activity, right? My understanding is some of these individuals actually like being in jail for a while. It makes it so that so it's very competitive when they're outside of jail and doing whatever they're doing. Like there seems to be an interesting ecosystem. So you might have the drug dealers, and then there's kind of what I think most people would kind of call gangsters. They're kind of above them, and they seem to control different territories, right? So they claim a piece of land, and anyone doing business within that land, they take a cut from. So taxes, essentially, right? It's a very interesting kind of phenomenon. You have like different type of individuals in gangs, or like that have a gang that are fighting for territory and like tax. I think it's the drug dealers they take money from, also sometimes also the prostitutes, I think. I'm not sure about local business. Like there's a cliche around like going to local businesses for protection money and stuff like that, but there's like an interesting taxation type system that happens with this and battles between them. But going in jail gives you a kind of rest. It seems, my understanding is like some perceive it as almost like a vacation, right? Later on they're back outside of jail and whatnot, but yeah, that's kind of an interesting perspective.
Okay, so number of points. You made a number of interesting statements there. So I don't know. I went sort of crazy. I didn't have any papers. I had to go find some paper to write this down. So I don't know if I got all the points here. So I mean, first of all, you make the point. You made this point earlier in the discussion, and yes, we're for obviously eugenics and dyseugenics is in the eye of the beholder, obviously, right? So when I'm putting forward this hypothesis, I guess I'm assuming some sort of perspective of the state or society, if that's such a thing, something like that, right? That's what I mean by eugenics. Perfectly willing to concede that other people might disagree about what is better and what's not better, sort of thing, right? So, but more substantially, right? So, one thing you commented on is like how many children do these people have? Like I think earlier you also were talking about. The suggestion that maybe our society is more beneficial to people with slower life histories and fast life histories, and one of the things behind that may well be that people who are criminally inclined may often have faster life histories, low impulse control, which how they end up in jail in the first place. So you're right, they may actually be having more children. So the question here, so there's two different questions. Like first of all, does the criminal system work as a form of eugenics? And you're right, if these people are having lots of children before they ever get into jail, or a disproportionate number of children before they get into jail, then the criminal justice system may not be an effective form of eugenics. But of course, that's separate from the question of whether it's intended or unconsciously, consciously or unconsciously, I would say probably unconsciously, intended to be a form of eugenics. Those are separate questions, right? But it would be interesting to know the actual numbers on that. But the other thing is that you were saying, well, you made the point about, well, these probably, you know, these usually aren't life sentences, and, you know, usually they're not life sentences. Most people don't go to jail for life. But the interesting thing, of course, is that, and we should emphasize that we're almost completely talking about men, right? Like, I don't remember that, but I think like 90% of all people in jail are men or something like this, right? You know, and I think for violent crime, the number's probably even higher than that. But anyways, so bear in mind, though, you're right, these people aren't going to jail for life, but most of the people who are engaging in crime, especially violent crime, these kind of things, the kind of things that you particularly want to eugenically, you know, take out of the gene pool, right? Assuming this is eugenic, right? Most of them are young, right? They're in prime reproductive age, and in fact, often the mating incentive and the violent incentive and the criminal incentive are all bound together. You were talking about gangs, and this is a big part of what drives gangs. I mean, no, there's been research showing that gang members have more access to women than non-gang members do in various populations, right? So these things are all tied together. So yes, these people are not getting life sentences, but they're committing their crimes in prime reproductive age, and they're going to jail in prime reproductive age. So from a eugenic point of view, you're sort of you don't need to put them in jail for their whole life. What you want to do is put them in jail for the period of time that they're more likely to be engaging in reproductive activity. Right. And so, you know, particularly keenly motivated to do so. Right. You know, as people get older, they lose a bit of they lose some of the testosterone and some of the motivation and all this. Right. But young people, young men, you know, this is a key time around reproduction, and, you know, a key time to have access to young women and this sort of thing. So from a eugenics perspective, again, this way of approaching criminal justice, crime, and law, it's like, you know, kind of does seem eugenic.